congratulations on this. Another amazing performance by
Thank you.
you. Were you just how familiar with Lee Miller were you?
I knew who she was, absolutely, and I was familiar with her work as a photographer. Um, but what I didn't know was just how many lives she seemed to live, how many times she kept reinventing herself, and just how powerful she was as a woman. 80 years ago, she was redefining femininity to mean resilience and power and courage and determination and compassion, all of those things that we live our lives by now. It's how we are with our friends, it's how we are raising our daughters. And the sheer determination she had to cut through all the red tape, to go into male-dominated spaces that she was not allowed into, but she just would not take no for an answer. She knew that she had as much of a right to be seated at that table as the men did. And she was really one of the early reportage photographers, what we now know to be reportage photographers, and were it not for her, we may never have known the stories of the victims of the atrocities of the Nazi regime, the way she was able to visually document their story, their plight, that tragedy, all the people left behind, all those millions of missing people. She was determined to find out what had happened to them, and look, she did. And without her, we may never have known those specific stories told through her eyes, through the female gaze.
How important do you think her story is today?
Her story is phenomenally important today, and if you think of the climate that we live in now and the importance of war photography, war journalism, women doing that job, and giving us access to the reality of what's happening, that how else would we have that? So I feel that Lee's story is not only relevant today in terms of the job that she did then and making sure that those stories are upheld, but her legacy is really that she was one of the very first women who was doing that kind of work. She was phenomenally inspiring. She suffered a terrible trauma as a child, but she refused to let that define who she was. And she threw herself at life and she lived it full throttle. And she just wouldn't take her foot off the gas. And I think that's important to today regardless, because it's so inspiring to see women of history who did phenomenal things in ways that we can be eternally inspired and motivated by. And Lee Miller was one of those incredibly important people.
She really is. Did this give you the research you did, and as you delved deeper into her story, does this give you a whole new appreciation and respect for war journalists around the globe?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it really, yes, it does. And in preparing to play her, I mean, I spent years actually in the archive. The process of developing the film for me was 5 years before our director came on board, and then my producing partner Kate Solomon came on board, and I was in that archive and I had my hands on everything from her camera to her clothes to photographs to her negatives to letters between her and Audrey Withers and letters between her and Roland, of which there are a lot. And I also had Antony Penrose, Lee's son, who was a creative consultant on the film. He was very much a part of the process for me, and we formed a really close bond. And I couldn't have done any of it without that kind of access. But most importantly, my friendship with Antony, it gave me access to what it had been like for him being raised by her. She had terrible PTSD after the war. She became a mother after the war, and they had a very difficult relationship. And he's documented that in the books that he's written about her. But it was so important for him that I got this film made, because many people had tried before. And I said to him, why weren't those films made? And he said, they didn't really get her. And for him, this film also represents a certain degree of of closure, actually, on a huge chapter in his life that he has spent really looking for answers after he found 60,000 negatives and prints of hers that she had put in boxes and shoved into the attic. In 1977, this was 5 months after she had died. He has devoted his life since then to making sure that the world knows about who she truly was and upholding her legacy. And it's just extraordinary what he's done, and he's very, very appreciative that we got the film made, that I did it.
Extraordinary what you've done. And as well as this amazing movie, of course, everybody's talking about the nude scenes, the no makeup, and you've said this isn't brave, this is my job. Talk to me about why that was important for you to have people understand that to you this is just normal.
But why don't we say, isn't it interesting, Terry, we don't say about the men, oh, isn't he brave? He didn't shave his beard.
Yeah.
Isn't he brave? He took his shirt off. You see, it's actually baffling to me. And it's very interesting because it's a whole other conversation about how we are still so obsessed with women's bodies on screen. I mean, it's just crazy. Lee was a very free woman. She was totally at ease with her physical self. It was very important that that energy was emulated and those principles were also a part of the film. And when we see her naked in the film in any capacity, it is always on her terms. She's always the one choosing. We deliberately never sexualized her because that's not what the film is about. It's about a woman who, if she felt like taking her clothes off and getting in Hitler's bathtub, she was going to do it. If she felt like, being a model for her husband who was practicing camouflage painting, well, she was going to do it. And those things all really happen, including the camouflage painting. There's tons of pictures of Lee totally naked, head to toe in Roland's camouflage paint. So it was really about honouring the truth of who she was. That wasn't the brave part. The brave part was saying in 2015, I'm going to make a film about Lee Miller, and 9 years later I did it. That's the brave part. Forget the no makeup and taking clothes off bit. That's just part of my job.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you speak so openly about it. And I mean, the film's amazing. You're always incredible. Obviously, there's already talk of awards and Oscar bars. When you hear this so early on for a performance like this that means so much to you, what do you think here?
I just want people to see the film. And sometimes with independent films, awards consideration in any capacity simply means that the film is more talked about and then therefore hopefully more watched. So listen, it would mean everything. It would mean everything to me. It really would.